Hello, today I'm going to share with you a tutorial on the basic belt bag pattern from Atelier Joy. This is a pretty compact little bag that can be worn on the waist or as a crossbody bag. It's fully lined with a front pocket and a top zipper as well, and an interior pocket in the lining. You can find this and my other patterns on my Atelier Joy Etsy shop linked below. Please like and subscribe. I'll be adding more tutorials on a regular basis. You'll want to cut out all of your fabric, interfacing and lining pieces according to the pattern and instructions. There are notches on the pattern piece that are notated with the word notch. Be sure you clip these. Clip little 1/4-inch clips at all of the notches. Those are going to be very important in terms of assembling the bag later. Cut your 1-inch strapping into your 2 lengths. Once you've cut your straps, apply fray check to both ends of both straps. For the front top and front bottom pieces, you want to finish all of those raw edges either by doing a zigzag stitch as I'm showing here, or serging or clipping with pinking shears. Now we're going to apply the front zipper. So you want to lay your front top piece face down on top of the zipper and center it on that zipper. And then using your zipper foot, stitch that with a 3/16 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to do the same thing with the front bottom piece. So line that edge up with your zipper, and then you're going to stitch again with a 3/16 inch seam allowance with your zipper foot. Press the front top and front bottom away from the zipper. Then top stitch 1/8 of an inch in from that seam where you applied the zipper. Now you're going to be applying the top zipper, that's your longer zipper, to the top pieces. So you want to center your top pieces on that zipper, lining up the unnotched edge of your top pieces with the edge of the zipper. And you'll have your top pieces face down or right side down against the top of the zipper. Pin along entire length of the top piece. And then again, you're going to use your zipper foot to stitch a 3/16 of an inch seam allowance. Now you're going to take your top lining piece and you're going to lay it so that the right side of your top lining is facing the underside of your zipper. Again, you're lining up the unnotched edge of the top lining here, and it should line right up with that exterior fabric that you just sewed. And then you're going to stitch right over that same seam line that you used to stitch the exterior fabric to your zipper. Just pin that exterior fabric and lining fabric out of the way so we can do the other side now. And you're going to take your exterior top for the other side, lining up that unnotched edge, and make sure it lines up with the top of the first side that you stitched to. They should be at the same placement on the zipper. And you can pin your lining underneath like you did before. And then again, we're going to sew this with a 3/16 of an inch seam allowance. Open everything out away from those zipper teeth and give it a good pressing. And now switching back to our regular presser foot, you're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from that zipper seam. Move your zipper pull to the center of that zipper and then stay stitch on those edges to keep that zipper closed while you're doing your next steps. Trim off the ends of the zipper so that it meets up with the edges of your fabric. Now you're going to put the top zipper piece onto the bottom piece, and you want the right sides facing. You're going to pin together on those short edges, and then you'll stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to apply the bottom lining piece. So you want the right sides of your top lining and your bottom lining to be facing each other. Pin those in place along the short edges. And then you're going to stitch those with a 1/2 inch seam allowance right over the same seam line that we used to stitch the exterior fabric. Now you've got this completed and lined top and bottom loop. You want to turn it so that the exterior fabric is right side out, and then press along those seams that connect the top and bottom so it's nice and flat. And then you're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from that seam on the bottom side. And here I took off part of the base of my sewing machine. You may want to do that just to have easier access to that seam. And now you're going to stay stitch a 1/2 inch in along the raw edges of that top bottom loop. We have to do this because we're going to be clipping into this to make it fit onto the front and back of the bag. So this stay stitching is pretty important. Moving on to the side flaps. Now, for my side flaps, I did not apply interfacing because I was using an upholstery fabric that was medium to heavy weight, and I didn't want too much bulk in those side flaps. But if you're using a lighter weight fabric, like just a quilting cotton or something, feel free to interface that. Fold that side flap so that the short edges are matching up. Those are the unnotched edges. And of course you want to fold it right side together, and then you're going to stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then open up that seam allowance and press. So you want that seam allowance to be right in the middle of your side flap loop. Grab your straps that you've cut and applied fray check to, and mark 1 inch away from the edge on both of those straps. Now you're going to slide that side flap loop over the strap. It's still inside out, and you're going to slide it over until the edge meets up with that line you just drew. Now make a mark 1/2 inch in from the edge of the side flap, the edge that's closest to the line that you drew, and then stitch over that line. Now we're going to turn that side flap right side out. Just pull it over the end of that strap. It's a little bit tough, but you can wiggle it out that way. And it should just meet up with the end of your strap. Give it a good pressing so it's nice and clean, and then top stitch about 1/8 of an inch in from the fabric. You see how I left that raw edge unstitched, but the other 3 sides you want to top stitch on. Then you're going to pin this in place. Let's talk about strap placement. If you are a right-handed person, then you're going to want to have that shorter strap on the right-hand side of your back so you can easily unbuckle with your right hand. If you're left-handed, opposite, you're going to want that short strap on your left side. So you want the seam side of your side flap down, and you're going to line it up with the exterior fabric of your back and line it up with the top side notch. The top of the side flap will line up with that top side notch. And you want it so the raw edge of that side flap is meeting up with the raw edge of the back piece. So the straps will actually be facing toward the middle. Then stay stitch those straps in place with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And fold those straps in and pin them in place so that they're away from the edges of your back piece and won't interfere with the sewing. Moving on to our interior pocket. Take your pocket piece and fold it right sides together, matching up the notches, and pin around those 3 sides. Now you're going to stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, pivoting at those corners, and you want to leave the space between the notches open because that's how we're going to turn it right side out. So you'll do 2 seams there, leaving that notched area open, and then clip your corners and turn it right side out. You can use a closed pair of scissors or pencil or something like that to push those corners out and make it a nice sharp corner. And then you want to finger press that opening in and then press with your iron. Now along the long edge that's not open, draw a line 3/4 of an inch from the top, and then you're going to top stitch over that line. Place your pocket onto your back lining at those placement marks and make sure that the top stitched edge of your pocket is closest to the placement marks. That's going to be your top of your pocket. Pin it on the sides and the bottom, and then top stitch 1/8 of an inch in along the along the sides and the bottom, leaving the top open. Be sure to back tack at the beginning and end of this stitching because you want to really secure that pocket. Okay, we're going to attach the top bottom loop to our front piece now. And you want to turn your top bottom loop so that the lining is facing out. And you're going to have the right side of your front piece matching up with the right side of your top bottom loop. Pin that, matching all the notches. And at the corners, you're going to have to clip into the top bottom loop to make that fit the curve of the front piece. So clip in right up to that stay stitching that we did, and then pin all the way around, and then stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. Next, we're going to apply the front lining. Open up that front zipper because you're going to need to turn everything right side out through that at the end. So you want to squish all that top bottom loop down and put your front lining piece on. The wrong side of your front lining piece is going to be facing out. And so you've got this little sandwich with the front exterior and the front lining on the outsides and your top bottom loop on the insides. Pin at all the notches. And again, stitch. You're going to stitch right over that same seam line, a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Stitch around the entire bag. Now we're going to eliminate some of this bulk in these seam allowances. So you want to trim all those seam allowances to about 1/4 inch. And then at the corners, cut out little triangles of fabric along that curve so that we don't have too much bulk in there. Open up that front zipper as far as it'll go, and then turn the whole thing right side out through that zipper opening. Okay, it's starting to take shape. Finger press around that seam and then press with your iron right along those seams for a crisp finish. Time to move on to the back. So turn that piece you just sewed inside out, so the lining is outside, and then lay your back piece right side down on top of it. So the right sides of your fabric are going to be matching up, and match up all those notches around it. Again, the top bottom loop is not going to fit right at the corners, so you're going to need to clip into that top bottom loop right up to that 1/2 inch stay stitching to release, and then you can pin those corners to match up with the back corners. Stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the entire bag. Okay, we're on to the most difficult step, which is applying the back lining. So what we're going to be doing is making a sandwich with the back lining on one side and the back on the other side, and everything else squished in between. Lay that back lining piece right side down. Make sure that the top of your pocket is at the top, along with the top zipper from the other part of the bag. And then pin around the entire bag at the notches and the corners. Now you've got this nice compact little sandwich, right? We're going to stitch over that same seam line that we used to attach the back exterior fabric. That's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And stitch around, leaving the bottom between the notches open for turning. Be sure to back tack at the beginning and end of this seam, because when you're turning the bag right side out, it's really going to put some strain on that seam. So give it a good back tack. Again, we need to trim that bulk out of the seam allowance. So trim everything except that bottom opening to 1/4 inch, and then cut out some little triangles of fabric at the curved corners so that when we turn that right side out, you won't have too much bulk in there. Turn it right side out through that opening that you left in the lining, and then you're going to press in along the opening of the lining 1/2 inch. pin in place, and hand stitch with a slip stitch to close that opening at the bottom of the lining. Everything is nicely closed up now, so you're going to turn your bag right side out. Finger press around the edge of the bag, and then use an iron to press around that edge of the bag too. Before we move on to applying the hardware, I just wanted to show you some options for the hardware. I'm generally using these plastic parachute buckles and these adjustable slide buckles that are metal, both from Dritz. But you can also get these plastic slide buckles. I think I bought these on Etsy. I just couldn't find black ones, so I'm using this black metal one. And since we're using 1-inch strapping, you want to use the 1-inch hardware as well. So we're going to be applying the pronged end of the buckle to the short strap. You want to feed that in. You're going to be going front to back, and then you want to overlap the end of that strap by about 2 inches so you have enough room to maneuver your sewing machine foot, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and pin that in place. Now for the long strap, first we feed that strap through the slide buckle, kind of snake it through. Then you're going to take the buckle end of your buckle and feed the end of the long strap through that. You're going to come up from the back to the front and then feed it again front to back. Now we're going to need to feed it back through the slide buckle. So push the strap so that you have a little bit of room to work with and feed it through the edge of the slide buckle closest to the bag, and then back up through the other side of the slide buckle farthest from the bag. And again, you want to overlap by about 1.5 to 2 inches on that strap and pin the end of the strap to the strap. Now you're going to straight stitch about a 1/4 inch in from the edge of your strap. Make sure you back tack a few times. Really make sure this stitching is secure. And then you're going to zigzag stitch over that raw edge just to make sure that there's no fraying. And again, you can back tack with the zigzag stitch to really secure it. Now you're ready to rock your bag. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. One of the fun things about this pattern is just picking out your fabric and your trim for this. You can have a lot of fun with different color combinations and fabric that really pops. You can find the link to the pattern and my Etsy shop in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'll be adding more tutorials on a regular basis.